Welcome along to the Point and Reunion podcast. This is the fourth episode of the new one this time. We're doing the Irish Masters, as you can see in the background here. And this week's podcast is supported by the Bentley group of bars, which you would have the Embankment, the Bentley, help me out here, Paul.
Oh, the Magnet.
The Magnet, where
Link
you were
47,
Link 47, 48. The Gate Bistro. We'd like to thank Towan Ski and the management of the Bentley Group for sponsoring this week's podcast. The Bentley provides entertainment 7 nights a week. All the rest of their bars and eateries provide entertainments at the weekends. You can catch some of us here on it. But just thanks to them guys for sponsoring this week's episode. Myself and Paul's here today. We are joined by the lovely Azariah Short, whose parents owned the Point on. Azariah's father, Frank, tragically passed away on the 13th of July this year, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride for you for the last while, for you and the family. So we decided that we wanted to dedicate this new podcast to Frank, the man, the legend that he was, and all the things that he done for the club in the northwest area. He put his own life in the line and his own family's life in the line and their business in the line, and this is just like a wee chat day for a bit of
respect and say thanks to Frank for everything he did for us all. He allowed us to dance back in the days under threat of his own life, his own business, and he ended up getting put in prison, losing contact with his own family, apart from visits every now and again.
Do you remember the visits?
Yeah, it was a long trek to Dublin back then. It took maybe 6 hours, and then I think he only got maybe an hour visit, but most of that was spent on him talking about the case and what how we're going to get around this and prove his innocence. Yeah,
which he did do eventually, but we'll get back to that in a wee bit. But just taking you back to what you remember of the Point on, that was I know you had you had apartments up the stairs, and that's where a lot of people know there was PAs and things in the days, or dancers, that they would have got changed up the stairs. And then would you live there? Your family home was further on down a wee bit.
It was down in Clare in Redcastle, so yeah, as you say, that was used for that type of thing. But I'm guessing the odd time they might not have been able to get a babysitter for us, and we would have been put up there, but would have sneaked down the odd time.
Because I remember, I think Paul does too, I remember you and Christian especially, you would have seen these in behind the bar, and then when the bar got or you were in the cloakroom, and then when the place started to fill up, because it started filling up from after 9:30 or something like that there, then you would have been shipped upstairs. So you would have,
and then we would have sneaked. So I was probably 11 or 12, Christian was maybe 12 or 13, and we'd come down. We'd sometimes be allowed to sit in the cloakrooms, but the odd time we'd go out and go dancing. I remember dancing on the glass dance floor a few times, and then the ravers would come up and go, "There's your dad, quick, hide."
They were keeping these right.
Yeah. I remember a mother and daughter that used to come down all the time. I don't know who they are now, but they were a mother and daughter, always come in and says, "Azariah, come on out for a dance."
Well, you never know, they could be watching this podcast and might leave a wee comment in the description on the bottom of it, but it'd be good to find out who that was, wouldn't it? But I remember the point too, that your daddy had the wee peepholes all around the place, out the back of the bar, so we could keep an eye on the place and stuff like that there. And then, so if your dad wasn't missing anything out there, he wasn't missing you and Christian being out, you know what I mean? But so what was it like for you as for family life when the Point was, when there was no trouble, when you were just running the normal, because you started as your dad would call them, the Sunday Rave Discos, and it was the 6th of May in 92 was the first one.
It's very hard for me to remember 92. I would have been 10.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that as a family, what was it like for your working week, and the dynamic, for you, like?
I think the fact that Dad was working weekends then, we probably had him a lot during the week.
Yeah.
And then he would have been away for the weekends. But family life was good then. We did a lot of holidays and stuff like that.
And then your mum would have been there too, like she manned the bar and the well, that was they called it the cafe bar or the chill out bar, was it? And had all the beds and stuff and all.
Oh yeah, Granny's something, was it?
Granny's Cottage, was it?
Was there a bed?
There was 2 beds. I think there was 2 beds, and then there was even a hammock or something.
Can't mind
For-
I came in the bed and there was a old granny, a dummy, an old granny
That's
in
right,
the bed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that used to get pushed to the side every week and everybody else was lying about the bed, smack. All gone.
But funny, when I was reading your dad's book, but I have a copy there. When I was reading your dad's book, and he was describing that he got the money together, he remortgaged for 50 grand to do the whole nightclub and the bar up, and he was saying that his pride and joy was the big guillotine in the middle.
Yeah.
And then
Life-size one.
Life-size guillotine, because only it was one when I was reading the book that it came back to me about the guillotine, because I remember stocks and I remember the cages with the skeletons and stuff hanging, and then the bar was made by Russian timber. I always admired the timber in the bar. It was the front bar as you come on was a cracker bar. I thought it was the railway slippers to start with, but then when I was reading your dad's book, it was Russian salvage timber that he used to build the bar. So it was.
And as you walk in, I remember to the left there was a cell there with a
right.
mannequin, and then they were all up the back of the seating area and stuff. There were cells everywhere with mannequins in them.
And chairs hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah,
and
yeah. Spray painted different colours.
It was cracker, like, so it was. So, as we said, you would have, at the weekends then, you would have been about, and then you would probably went upstairs, or you would have had a babysitter or something to take you home. Now, Jalasco, and Sabrina. Jalasco was to be on the day, but we work commitments, he couldn't make it. Jalasco would have been your dad's right hand man.
Yeah.
So he would have been doing the door, checking in with your dad, making sure about all the bouncers, wouldn't they, Paul? And what else?
Well, yes, they've been doing the door all the time, and Jalasco just looking after us and making sure everybody was doing, and then he liaised a lot with the security and the things. I think Sabrina I used to see most of the time in the cloakroom, and then Natasha just ran around the place.
I think she was in charge
more in the bars and things.
So
she's more out dancing. She was working.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think your dad pulled me one day because we were. I was DJing and I was on the start, and then Paul would have been on then, and then we had the guest on. But then sometimes Paul would have done later. We would put the guest on, stood after me. But I always got paid extra to do the lights when your dad was. Because they used to make me do the lights, and says you do the lights and we'll pay you extra and all. But many a night I was out in the dance floor or down the bar, and he caught me a couple of times, and I think he gave me a telling off one day.
I would say he did.
And that was the end of that. Like, that never happened again. But going back to Jalasco and Natasha and Sabrina would have seen the raids and stuff. I know you witnessed one of the raids.
I did witness one of them, yeah. I was in the cloakroom, the one on the right as you walk in. There's one on the right and then one down the left.
That's right.
So I was in the one on the right, and everything just went quiet, and I was just thinking, what's going on? And the woman who worked there said something about a raid, and then I just saw them marching in one after the other. But I remember clearly a woman screaming and shouting, let him the fuck go, let him the fuck go, I'd fucking kill you. And I was just going, what's going on here? And the worker was like, oh, she's going to get arrested. So I don't know if that sounds familiar to you.
Well,
Which raid that?
Thanks. No, just when you're talking about raids, this book, there's a bit in it that there was a guy called Emma McCann from Derry. He ran for council and stuff like that there, but at the time I think he was working for Hot Press magazine in Dublin, and he wrote an account from a wee girl that was 18 of that raid, the biggest raid. So I'll just read a wee bit of it from here. A few weeks ago on a Friday night, a huge force of Gardaí descended in the small unassuming village of Quigley's Point and stormed into a disco at a popular local venue. The Point Inn. Kathy, an 18-year-old who was there, recalls what happened. It was terrifying. They came pounding in, dark uniforms, waving batons and roaring, "Get thee back, get up," against the wall, and anybody that didn't move fast enough was thumped. Some of them had helmets on and heavy jackets. They were all excited and angry. It all happened all of a sudden. There was a commotion and the whole place was filled with them before you had a chance to think. The lights went on in the middle of the confusion and the music stopped, and there were chairs and tables everywhere with people running and screaming. A lot of people were screaming. There were bangs which sounded like shots, or I thought at the time. My first thought was it had to be something to do with the paramilitaries. I dived under a seat at the side. I was shivering. The shouting kept going on and on and on, and then I got up and looked around. They were grabbing people out of the crowd and pulling at them. People were diving in behind one another and being dragged out with arms around their necks and pushed to the ground. I was trying to pass and behind people. People were ordered to turn their pockets, empty their bags, and it was complete mayhem. Nobody knew what else was going to happen. A lot of followers were shouting fascists and saying that they had no right. They were roaring at them to shut up and keep their fucking mouths closed. The people were being stood on by guards on their feet, and some of them were grabbed and hit. So that only that's only like a wee small taster of that night, because we talked about it on this podcast before, and it was a bit lame. But when you read that book and you read people's accounts of it, that was an 18-year-old girl that was at it that night, and that's what it was like. I remember, as we said before, they came on. I read the bit that your dad said, and they came running past him, right, and the door, and then when he looked out, there was busloads. They busload 200 yards to the venue. They closed the roads from Derry down under it, and they closed the other road. They only kept back roads open so that they could, so if there was any traffic about, that they could get it moved. But it was just a complete and utter attack. So it was
sledgehammers.
Aye.
Probably the sounds you mentioned there.
Aye. I remembered. I stand in the DJ box and I remember hearing the sledgehammers and
on top of tables. They broke in through the doors, the exit doors with
That's
sledgehammers. Came in with a riot gear on them, motorcycle helmets and everything on them. They banged. People were sitting at the tables. They banged the sledgehammers down and broke tables. You know what I mean? They scared the life out of everybody. It was in the building. It was like a military operation.
I remember a lot of people that night actually thinking it was paramilitaries, because they didn't know what was going on. It was just all of a sudden the whole place was surrounded and just everybody was thing. But that's what led then on to your father's the guards really having it in for your father and corrupt Gardaí.
Even getting 200 guards, that was a well planned operation.
It was. And the guys, I read in your dad's book that the guys that were behind it were even planting bombs in Donegal and then pretend they find them so that they could take the promotion. But it was just pure corruption. And your father suffered at the end of it. There was 3-4 raids in the point. Then there was threats from paramilitaries. The point then was actually burnt down then, which was while your father was in jail, and your mum was still trying to run a business like that. And that must have been hard for you as a family, trying to go on ahead with your dad being in jail.
Yeah, well, he was threatened, if you don't stop, we will burn it down.
Aye.
But the other thing too, he told me over the years, is that he did find pushers and he would call the guards, get them taken away.
Aye.
Half an hour later, they'd be trying to get in again, and he'd say, well, what the hell are you doing here? And they would say, well, the guards said they would release us if we came back down here again.
See, there was corrupt, because I read it in your dad's book too. He was saying that that any nights of the raids, and then there was undercover guards were allowed into the premises every week. So your dad told all the bouncers to step back and let the guards do their job, but they weren't there to look for pushers. They were there to keep an eye on your father. What way he was running the
well, he was
nightclub.
One of the guys who did end up was one of the ones that framed him.
Aye,
perjured himself.
But then your dad went through. Many years was your dad in jail?
3-year sentence in for about 2.5, or just under 2.5.
And then he had his appeal.
Oh, the whole thing I think was 17 years from start to finish.
Jeez, that's
so he was a guilty man in the eyes of the law for a long time.
It must have been a wild ordeal, especially for your mum. Your mum's still living. She's a great woman, but it must have been a really hard ordeal for your mum, because she had to try and keep. Many of you, there's 5. Keep yous on toe, put yous to school, know what I mean? And then Gillespie would have been the man of the house. Then with your dad being there, there's a lot of pressure for him too.
Yeah, and sure, nobody could get jobs, Natasha or Gillespie, because we were all shunned. Everybody was shunned.
And they say that your dad brought a lot of jobs to that area. When you think Quigley's Point, at that time when the Point Inn started, there was only 400 residents in that area. And you think there was 200 guards that night. You know what I mean? So that's half the residents' population. So have you any other memories from your dad from the Point that you can?
Just his determination to free his name. As I said, he was just hell-bent on getting there and did everything he could, all the while being a family man as well, and making sure we were all okay.
But you got a lot of support from yourselves and all the family members. Yeah,
and just he was offered to walk free, I think, basically the day he went in, if he would admit guilt, and he wouldn't do it.
No.
Which he said, told me himself, it was very hard because he knew we were all going to struggle at home and Mum was going to struggle, but he couldn't admit guilt when he wasn't guilty.
No, that's true. And the corruption within the Gardaí, to take that go up against that there, and for that to eventually come out, although it took a long time, but for him to stay strong the whole way through that, and get the right result at the end up. That was must have been. That's a
How long
long.
did you say it took him to get the right result? 17 years.
I think from the start.
From the whole thing started.
From the whole thing started to them was about 17 years. Yeah.
That's a hell of a fight. And a hell of a struggle. What did he do for a living during them years after the point on then, Frank? What was the source of income?
Fought his case, but he was a chartered accountant. Not sure if he did do any work when he was out. I'm really not sure. But Mum was a nurse
I know your mum was a nurse.
until retirement, so
So the family income, more or less, after the point on was burnt down and everything was taken away from him.
Because that money and that mortgage for the reverb was still owed and stuff too, like.
Yeah.
So it was.
Yeah, they definitely did struggle financially after that. Mum said she used to have to put porridge into soups to thicken them up and all that kind of stuff, to keep us going.
But that would be your mum, because even when she was running the point, like, your dad had all the business, running around making sure the bouncers were there, making sure everything was sweet, and then contending with the Gardaí, and then everything else, all the other factors. But your mum would have been in the bar, looking after people, because she was a mental health nurse, wasn't she, or was she a nurse?
No, a nurse. General nurse.
General nurse.
All sorts of areas.
So anybody wasn't feeling well or was sick, or she would have looked after them, as well as she would have been dressed up in costume all the time, serving toasties or tangle twisters, as you would say. Sabrina used to sell.
But they did that at home too, just dress up for the crack. That's why, as I was saying at the funeral, he was good crack, because they just dressed up for dinner sometimes, and you're like, what are you at? Just a bit of crack.
They were very eccentric in their own way. So they were, but because you remember the party we went to, Frank held a party for us one night at the house, and we all went, and I remember you had a big swimming pool, and I think it was you and Christian were throwing the cans under
the... That was Jalisco and Natasha's joint 21st.
That's what it was, that's what it was.
Yeah, the cans from the north sank.
Aye, they had all the harp, I remember all the harp cans at the bottom of the pool and stuff.
Swim down and
used to get them. There's no way we were jumping on to get them, but I remember that, and I think your mammy was dressed in a wee grass skirt and things like that there, and your dad had the cigar, and they was dressed up and all that there too, but they were some crack, like, so they were. But then that, as you were saying there at the funeral, me and Paul were at the funeral, and I think he's really done him proud. It was a lovely funeral. It wasn't like a sad, well, I'm sure it was sad for you all, but it was like a celebration of life more so than it was a funeral, because you all came, and your dad was a very extrovert, and you all came in your big clothes and whatever you wanted to, but your dad would have wanted all bright colours, and the music, and it was fantastic, and it was just a lovely atmosphere. And then even coming out of it, when we got chatting to these and stuff like that there, it wasn't as sombre as you expect to be at a funeral.
We said nobody was going to be wearing black. We didn't want to wear black, so that wasn't what Dad would have wanted at all. No. And he wasn't wearing black in the coffin either, so he was wearing a nice flamboyant suit.
That would have been Frank, like. Yeah. But because the time that he died, we had put it up on social media and the Point On page and stuff, and you seen the outpouring of grief from everybody, like. Yeah. And I'm sure you got loads of messages and things too.
I did. I was overwhelmed, Jess, and I was reading both messages from both of your posts, and it gave me a lot of warmth. Yeah,
that's good.
A legend seemed to be one of the biggest words that came through.
A lot of people, a lot of respect for him, and a lot of people in this area knows the story, and knows what your family went through, and knows what your dad went through. So we applaud you all. Like, that was a wild sacrifice for you all to take for us to have our thing. You know what I mean? But that's what I read about in the book, and your dad was saying, could you imagine a nightclub in Dublin and St Stephen's Green, and the guards coming on, 200 people, because maybe somebody's in a club taking drugs or something like that there, and throwing them all out in St Stephen's Greens with their suits and their dicky bows. Would never happen. But in Quigley's Point was a different story. But then it was just bad feeling between the guards and your dad. And your dad always worked with the guards, to be fair.
I think it was, as you say, it was just those two boyos really that were planting the bombs and stuff, because they actually did something to another nightclub owner over in Rafo, I think it was, framed him for murder, I think. That's the one. So yeah, they didn't care who the victims were here. They just going to get up the ranks.
But then suffer everybody else that gets on their way, like. But No, we have great memories from the point. You know, like we're still doing these reunions, and that's what me and Paul were chatting. Like the one of the biggest reunions we ever had was in St Colm's Hall. Were you at that one? No.
Oh God, I don't know. I was
Christian
at it.
was the only one with that. It was Christian.
Christian was at.
Oh, right.
And
I was at the one last year.
you were the one.
And actually that night I was down in my parents, and Dad says, "Where are you going tonight?" I says, "Do you know where I'm going?" And he says, "Where?" I said, "I'm going to the Point Inn." He thought I was joking, and I says, "I am."
he'd be looking to go up for you. No, but everybody used to say, and the Point Inns were, you know, that night, that big one especially was the best reunion ever. But everybody would say, God, it just topped it off if Frank and Sally were on the stage. No,
Yeah. Did they ever go to any of them?
No.
A
But
speech
then,
from Frank Short, one of Frank's famous speeches at that one would have been
would have
icing
been
on the
class.
cake.
Do you remember this night that they got up in the Point Down and made the big speech after the race?
He just got up and he was telling everybody.
Like
till they were
directly
sitting down.
after?
Directly after.
And then the music came on and the whole place went
The
bananas again.
place went.
I love
You
it.
never seen an atmosphere like it. Honestly, it was unreal. Like, you know what I mean. But your dad got up, and they'd smashed the lights and all this night. And we had talked about it in a previous podcast. I was the only DJ that got to play. That your dad and Paul flew your boy over from the Monastery Sound, and he was to be on after me. He'd never seen anything, and just all these fucking, you know, people getting dragged out and.
Yeah.
Everything, just it was
So
crazy.
Dad kind of calmed them down then with the speech after or something?
No, he
or?
got them riled. He
He
riled
riled
them
them
right
right
up.
up again.
I'm just getting a
But I
picture
can
of
remember
Braveheart in my head here.
The speech was like it was like a really moving speech, and it was like you know, about being like second class citizens and about the guards and about, you know, them, you know, we should have freedom to dance and all this here, and I was just trying to get, you know, it's the choice that the guards didn't want people to have. And then I read about in the book too about your dad being in Derry and paramilitary's coming and saying to him, see if you don't close your doors, you'll be shot next.
Actually, you just reminded me of something. We used to go down to the Redcastle Hotel, and I was sitting in the jacuzzi with Dad one night, and someone came over and whispered in his ear, and he literally just jumped out and went away off, and I was like, what's going on here? Only to find out they were down looking for him, and they had to lock him into one of the rooms up in the hotel.
Jesus. You know, that was crazy. And then he had it, then your dad, he got guarantees that he could go and meet them. So he went and met the two boys. It was always the same two boys. And he went and met them, and they says to him, look, there's a big purge of drugs in there, and we don't want the Point Down open. So your dad did close it twice on their thing, but then it came to Christmas. Do you remember the Christmas that you done the flyer with the
Dare Journal thing, was it?
that was the year, and your dad, they still had to pay this £50,000 mortgage, so there was no funds coming in, and he just says, you know what, we're going to open for Christmas. And they opened it, and they did. It was your dad says in the book, even it was a really, really busy Christmas, but you had to do that as a family to survive.
That's it.
You know what I mean? And then the boys came back to him and says, we told you to close. And he says, well, I have a family to feed. And he said, well, we're closing it. So your dad, I think, closed it for maybe about the space of 5 or 6 months before he opened. He had to open it again. He couldn't afford to keep it closed, and then it was burnt down. So it was. But I'm sure, like us, there's plenty of stories you can talk about, but we just wanted to invite you on here to, you know, talk about your dad and stuff, and just give you our sympathies and all the Point Down family sympathies too.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And it's your birthday today.
It is. 21.
21 today. You're nearly as old as Paul.
I'm 31.
Catching up.
21 now.
10 years on the 8.
So, and your mum and all's keeping well?
Aye, she's doing good, yeah.
That's good, good. You can send her love too. So, I'm sure on the description of the podcast there'll be support and wee questions or stuff, so we'll forward anything to you.
Thank you.
Hopefully, if it's not too much, we might see you at the thing, but we'll see how things go. And do you let Glasgow and the rest of the family know that we were asking for them?
Oh, well, of course. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you still keep them alive and everything that you do.
It's an honour.
We'll be remembering the night of the thing too. So,
yeah, thank you.
but thank you for coming along
You're
today.
very welcome.
Thank you, guys.